Good day, everyone. This is Vice Consul LV de Guzman. I'd like to welcome you all to the Philippine Consulate General in Calgary's webinar entitled Understanding Domestic Violence in the Canadian Context, featuring Attorney Rosalind Balangkit Bernardo, Attorney Chantal Borja, Ms. Francia Badoso of the CCIS, and Ms. Susan Azarcon of the MCHB. Before we begin, let us go over some reminders. Please be informed that this session is being live streamed on the PCG's Facebook page. We would like to remind the panelists and the reactors to please keep their microphones on mute to minimize background noise during the webinar. We encourage our reactors to share their insights and ask questions, and we request that they speak and ask questions concisely. Please limit each intervention to no longer than 1 minute and 30 seconds. Finally, we also encourage our attendees to ask their questions and share their views and reactions by using the question and answer function of the webinar. Please keep your questions and comments on topic. On the screen now is the program for this afternoon's webinar. Consul General Zaldi Patron will deliver his opening remarks to formally start the session. I will introduce our featured experts today before they proceed with their respective presentations. After all the speakers have delivered their presentations, we will then open the floor for the question and answer forum. We have about 20 to 30 minutes for the featured speakers to address comments and answer questions. During the open forum, our reactors will be given 2 minutes to share their opening insights. The first reactor will be Peter Escanlar of the Philippine Association of Saskatchewan. The second reactor is Shirley Chavez, President of the UP Alumni Association of Alberta. Rounding up our reactors is Lito Velasco of the Alberta Filipino Journal. Reactors may have further interventions where they can share their insights and ask further questions later throughout the open forum. This is where we request that they limit each succeeding intervention to no longer than 1 minute and 30 seconds. By 6:50 p.m., our speakers will give their respective 3-minute concluding observations and closing messages for the attendees and reactors, where they may summarize what they want us to remember as the key takeaways of the discussions. At 7 p.m., Consul General Zaldi will deliver his closing remarks and formally end this session of the PCG online forum or webinar. Now, to formally start this session, please welcome Consul General Zaldi Patron. Congen, I'll just set you on under the spotlight. Hold on. Consul General, you have the spotlight.
Yes, maraming salamat, Vice Consul LV de Guzman. Magandang hapon po sa lahat po ng aming listeners, and welcome to today's online forum of the Philippine Consulate General in Calgary. Our topic this afternoon, understanding domestic violence in the Canadian context, may be considered by some as an elephant in the room, but we think it is something relevant and worth discussing within the Filipino community in Alberta and Saskatchewan. On a personal note, what motivated the PCG to tackle this subject is a case that was brought to us by Canadian authorities involving a Filipino mother and her son who got reunited in Alberta after spending years apart while the son was growing up in the Philippines. Not too long after being together again, the mother and son found themselves in a situation constituting child abuse, and they ended up being separated by the authorities as the child was placed under the custody of Canadian foster parents. It is a sad story that the PCG does not want to happen to other Filipino families in Canada. This afternoon, we will have a chance to educate ourselves about domestic violence in Canada, in the hope that none of our community members will find themselves in situations tantamount to domestic violence, neither as a victim nor as a perpetrator. I am thankful to our resource persons today. We have two Filipino-Canadian lawyers, Attorney Roslyn Bernardo and Attorney Chantal Borja, who will explain to us the aspects of domestic violence based on the criminal and family laws of Canada. In addition, we have representatives from two non-profit organizations, Ms. Francia Bodoso of the Calgary Catholic Immigration Society and Ms. Susan Azarcon of the Multicultural Health Brokers Cooperative of Edmonton. They will share with us information on how to prevent incidences of domestic violence and the social services available for victims of domestic violence. I encourage our viewers to listen attentively to our resource persons. I now give the virtual floor back to Vice Consul LV, who will further introduce our speakers today. Salamat po.
Thank you, Consul General. I will just share the screen again so people can see the main PowerPoint presentation. There you go. Today's first featured speaker is Rosalind Balangkit Bernardo, an independent criminal defense and immigration practitioner. Rosalind is a criminal defense and immigration lawyer. She is also a member of the Philippine Bar. Prior to emigrating to Canada, she worked at the Office of the Solicitor General and the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, or PEZA. Rosalind, please turn on your video. I will now set the spotlight on you. Hold on. Rosalind, you now have the floor. Rosalind, we cannot hear you. Would you like to unmute your microphone?
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. The purpose of my presentation is to inform and educate the attendees on the presentation topic. No action should be taken based on this presentation alone. I can also advise the attendees that by doing this presentation, I am not engaged in or rendering legal services. My topic this afternoon is domestic violence in the criminal law context. What is domestic violence? Is it a criminal code offense? Domestic violence, or as others would term it, family violence, is itself not a criminal code offense. It is merely a term used to describe the nature of the assault. Domestic violence or family violence is any form of abuse, mistreatment, or neglect that a person employs or causes to a family member or to an intimate partner. The victim of the abuse can be a child, a youth, or an adult. The most common form of domestic violence happens between spouses or in persons in intimate relationship. However, it can also happen between and among siblings and even parents and their children, or grandparents and their grandchildren. There is no specific offense of domestic violence in the Criminal Code of Canada. However, most acts of domestic violence are considered crimes in Canada. What are the different forms or types of domestic violence? We have physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological or emotional abuse, financial abuse, and neglect. Let me explain the forms of domestic violence and cite acts or behavior constituting the abuse and the criminal code provisions that deal with them. Let's start with physical abuse. This is the intentional use of force against another person without his or her consent. Examples of acts of physical abuse are hitting, slapping, or kicking, punching someone, throwing objects at someone, tying someone, strangling, choking, stabbing, shooting, burning, or killing. The Criminal Code enumerates the offenses relating to the use of physical abuse. Examples of this are assault, kidnapping, abduction of a young person, homicide, murder, infanticide. Another type of domestic violence is sexual abuse, which can be committed against adults and children and includes such acts as sexual touching or sexual activity without consent. This also includes forcing sex on a spouse or common law partner or dating partner. The Criminal Code of Canada enumerates the offenses relating to sexual abuse. These are sexual assault causing bodily harm or with a weapon, and aggravated sexual assault. The scope of sexual assault is extremely broad. It covers actions such as unwanted kiss or touching someone on his or her buttocks or private parts or fondling, to the more serious ones such as rape or unwanted sexual intercourse. There are also provisions in the Criminal Code that protect children and youth from sexual abuse and from sexual activities that exploit them. These are the offenses of sexual interference, invitation to sexual touching, sexual exploitation, corrupting children, child pornography, which includes the making, possession, and distribution of child pornography. Another form of domestic violence is emotional abuse or psychological abuse, which is the use of force or the use of words or actions to control, intimidate, or frighten someone. Examples of this kind of abuse are threatening someone, stalking, or following someone repeatedly. The Criminal Code lists the offenses related to psychological or emotional abuse within the family. These are criminal harassment, uttering threats, making indecent and harassing phone calls. And then we also have another type of domestic violence, which is financial abuse. This happens when someone uses money or property to control or exploit another. Examples of this form of abuse are taking someone's money or property without permission, withholding or limiting money to control someone, pressuring someone to sign documents. The Criminal Code lists crimes relating to financial abuse. These are theft, including theft by a person holding a power of attorney, fraud, including forgery of credit card, and extortion. And then we have finally we have neglect, which happens when a family member who has a duty to care for another member fails to provide him or her with basic needs. Examples of acts of neglect are not providing proper food or adequate clothing, failing to provide adequate health care, medication, failing to prevent physical harm, failing to ensure proper supervision if needed. The Criminal Code offenses that relate to neglect within the family are failure to provide the necessaries of life, abandoning a child, and criminal negligence. The most common form of domestic violence relates to physical abuse. In our court system, the most commonly charged offense related to domestic violence is assault. Assault is defined in the Criminal Code of Canada as the intentional use of force against a person without that person's consent. Now, what are the different types of assault charges in Canada? We have assault simpliciter or common assault, which is committed when without the consent of another, a person intentionally applies force to another or attempts or threatens by an act or gesture to apply force to another person. Assault can be something as pushing or shoving someone, slapping or punching someone in the face. And then we have assault with a weapon or causing bodily harm, which is committed when the aggressor carries, uses, or threatens to use a weapon or imitation thereof when he causes bodily harm to the complainant, or he choked, suffocates, or strangles the complainant. And a weapon here can be anything. It's not just a knife or a firearm. It can be a belt, a bat, a cell phone, a cord, a rock, a broken beer bottle, a wooden spoon, peanut butter jars, hockey sticks, or motor vehicle. And we have aggravated assault when the assault results in injury that is so severe that it maims or wounds or disfigures or endanger the life of the complainant. Example of an aggravated assault is when injury necessitating injury or surgery on the skull, on the spine, causing lifelong or crippling long-term injury to the victim. In Canada, domestic violence is dealt with seriously. Commission of acts of domestic violence can result in criminal charges. Now, what happens to a person accused of committing domestic violence? The police normally would invite the person being complained of for investigation at the police station. The police might arrest the person complained of if the police believes the person has broken the law, or the person may have to go to jail for a few hours until a bail hearing is conducted. Or in some instances, the police, after investigation, might decide to release the person on an undertaking or a promise to appear in court on a particular date. The undertaking or the promise to appear normally includes conditions such as not to contact or communicate with the complainant either directly or indirectly, not to go to the place of residence, employment, or school of the complainant. There could also be weapons prohibition if a weapon was involved in the offense, and there can be condition prohibiting the consumption of drugs or alcohol if drugs or alcohol was a factor. The conditions in the undertaking or in the promise to appear should not be treated lightly by the person subject thereof. A violation of any of the terms of the undertaking and or promise to appear constitutes a breach thereof and is a criminal offense under the criminal code. What is the evidence required at the police investigation? In a majority of cases, charges are based on the mere statement given by the complainant. Actual injuries, sworn statement, medical records, or third-party witness are not required to formally charge someone with assault. What happens after a person is charged? The person charged has to appear in court for his or her court dates. He or she may retain a lawyer to represent him, and he or she has the option to plead guilty or to plead not guilty and to set a case for trial. When the accused is found guilty of the offense, either on a guilty plea or after trial, the judge will decide on the appropriate sentence, which can range anywhere from fine, probation, or jail time. It is important to note that once a criminal charge is filed in court, the victim cannot simply drop the charge, even if he or she expresses his or her desire not to go ahead with the charges. It is only the Crown Prosecutor that has the authority to withdraw the charge. What are the consequences of a criminal conviction? A criminal conviction means a person is getting a criminal record. Having a criminal record can often make it more difficult for a person to find employment, as most employers require criminal background checks. Are there any collateral immigration consequences of conviction for any of the offenses involving domestic abuse? Yes, there could be immigration consequences depending on the nature of the offense for which the person was convicted, or depending on the status of the person convicted of the offense. That could result in deportation or removal from Canada. A criminal record may also hinder a permanent resident from becoming a Canadian citizen. In conclusion, I cannot but stress the seriousness of domestic violence cases. The impact to victims and families of domestic violence is significant, that most of the victims suffer not only physical, but mental and psychological problems that linger after they have been healed of their physical injuries. Likewise, those charged and convicted of domestic violence cases face severe criminal penalties and sometimes serious immigration consequences, which in most cases affect not just the individuals, but their families too. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosalind. Now we're going to head on to Chantal. I'll just unpin you and then put Chantal. There you go. Thanks for that, Rosalind. We will now hear from our next speaker, Chantal Borja. Chantal was called to the Law Society of Alberta Bar in May 2018 and is currently an associate at Mainwood Legal Services. Chantal obtained her Bachelor of Laws at the University of Santo Tomas in the Philippines in 2010 and became a member of the Philippine Bar in 2011. Prior to coming to Calgary, she had already gained her wide range of experience over the course of 4 years in numerous practice areas, such as, but not limited to, litigation and corporate law in the Philippines. She also worked as an in-house counsel in an energy company in the Philippines for 3 years. Since she was called to the bar in 2018, she has practiced mainly in family law, which includes domestic violence, child custody, child support, spousal support, and division of matrimonial property. She appears before the provincial courts, Court of Queen's Bench, and Court of Appeals. Chantal, welcome. I'll set the spotlight on you in a moment. There you go. You have the floor.
Thank you, Vice Consul. I will just share my PowerPoint. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, I see the slide on family violence.
Okay.
Family violence defined.
Okay. I will be speaking about domestic violence in the context of family law. Many still regard family violence as a taboo, a topic that should not be discussed in public, a topic that should not be shared with other people. People who experience family violence more often than not choose to suffer in silence. They cannot seem to find the courage to tell other people about it. They feel uncomfortable sharing their story. Why? There are many possible reasons. One of this is that these people who experience family violence might not know where to go and whom to talk to, even if they want to speak up and report the incident. They are at a loss and do not even know what to do and where to start. It is alarming that, according to reports, during the pandemic, the cases on domestic violence have increased. If you are or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, know that there is a legislation which protects family members against domestic or family violence. This is the Protection Against Family Violence Act. So what does family violence mean under the Protection Against Family Violence Act? Can you see my slide? Sorry.
Yes, I see the slide on family violence defined.
Okay. So family violence is defined as first, any intentional or reckless act or omission that causes injury or property damage and that intimidates or harms a family member. Second, any act or threatened act that intimidates a family member by creating a reasonable fear of property damage or injury to a family member. Third, forced confinement. Fourth, sexual abuse. And fifth, stalking. Let's talk about the first one. The law does not only refer to an intentional or reckless act that causes injury, but also an omission, meaning failure to do something that ought to be done, especially when there is a legal obligation to do so. Also, the law does not only refer to an intentional or reckless act or omission that causes injury, but also one that causes property damage. That means even if you were not physically harmed, but the intentional or reckless act or omission causes property damage under the law, that is considered family violence. It also talks about any intentional or reckless act or omission that intimidates or harms a family member. When the intentional act or omission results to an intimidation, though there is no physical violence to speak of, that is still considered family violence under the Protection Against Family Violence Act. Let's go to the second one. Not only does the law refer to an act, but also a threatened act. Even if it is only a threat, as long as it resulted in an intimidation which caused fear on the mind of the family member that he or she or someone in the family might get injured or that their property might be damaged, then that is considered family violence. Now let's discuss the third one. When you are being locked up in a room or in your house, when you are being forbidden to go out or leave the house, when you are being a prisoner in your own home, that is already considered family violence, even if not a strand of your hair or a tip of your nails was touched. Let's go to the fourth one. Even if you are a married couple, your spouse cannot force himself on you. A no is a no. And if you say no, you cannot be compelled to submit to your spouse. Otherwise, it is considered family violence. Now, let's discuss the fifth one, sexual abuse. Stalking. Stalking means a repeated conduct by a person without lawful excuse or authority that the person knows or reasonably ought to know constitutes harassment of a family member and causes a family member to fear for a family member's personal safety. When you are being followed wherever you go without your consent, when all of your activities are being secretly monitored, when your correspondences, emails, social media accounts, or even your cellular phones are being checked without your permission, and that cause fear for your family's safety, that is considered family violence. But this definition of family violence should not be construed so as to limit a parent or a person standing in the place of a parent from using force by way of correction toward a child who is under the care of that parent or person, so long as the force does not exceed what is reasonable under the circumstances. If you are a victim of family violence, you have two options. You can file either an application for an emergency protection order or an application for a Queen's Bench protection order. In an emergency protection order or EPO, the application can be filed without giving a notice to the other party, meaning the perpetrator, because of the urgency that you be protected from further harm. On the other hand, in a Queen's Bench protection order, the applicant who is the victim is required to give a notice of the application to the other party who is the perpetrator. The good thing is in both applications, there is no cost for filing them. In an EPO, the applicant who is the victim or even a police or the Child and Family Services may file the application on behalf of the applicant with the Provincial Court of Alberta. For the court to grant an EPO, the court must be satisfied that a family violence has occurred. The claimant has reason to believe that the respondent will continue or resume carrying out family violence, and by reason of seriousness or urgency, the order should be granted to provide for the immediate protection of the claimant and other family members who reside with the claimant. Before the court grants an EPO, the court will also consider several factors, such as history of family violence, whether there is or has been a controlling behavior by the respondent towards the claimant or other family members, whether the family violence is repetitive or escalating, existence of any immediate danger to persons or property, vulnerability of elderly claimants, effect of exposure to family violence on any child of the claimant or on any child who is in the care and custody of the claimant, best interests of the claimant and any child of the claimant or any child who is in the care and custody of the claimant, and the claimant's need for a safe environment to arrange for longer-term protection from family violence. I just want to emphasize that in order for a judge to grant an EPO, the judge must be satisfied that it is serious or urgent that an EPO be granted in order to protect the life of the claimant. In terms of the scope of relief, the Queen's Bench protection order allows the claimant to have a broader relief, but in both orders, the court may order that first, that the respondent be restrained from attending at or near or entering any specified place, such as the residence of the claimant, place of employment, or school of the claimant. The court may also order that the respondent be restrained from contacting the claimant. The court may also grant the claimant and other family members exclusive occupation of the residence for a specified period, even if the respondent is the sole owner of the house, or even if they are leasing a house. The court may also direct a peace officer to remove the respondent from the residence immediately or within a specified time. The court may also direct a peace officer to accompany a specified person to the residence to remove his personal belongings. And the court may direct the seizure and storage of weapons where the weapons have been used or have been threatened to be used to commit family violence. So for example, if the respondent used a knife to threaten the claimant, then the court may direct the seizure of that knife. That's it for the Protection Against Family Violence Act, but I would like to mention the recent amendments to the Divorce Act, which deal with family violence. Under the amended Divorce Act, the court shall take into consideration only the best interest of the child in making a parenting or a contact order. One of the factors that the court shall consider in determining the best interest of the child is family violence and its impact on, among other things, the ability and willingness of any person who engaged in the family violence to care for and meet the needs of the child. And second, the appropriateness of making an order that would require persons in respect of whom the order would apply to cooperate on issues affecting the child. Under the amended Divorce Act, the term family violence is even given a wider scope. It is not limited to physical abuse. It also includes any conduct, whether or not the conduct constitutes a criminal offense, that is violent or threatening, or that constitutes a pattern of coercive and controlling behavior, or that causes that other family member to fear for their own safety or for that of another person. And in the case of a child, the indirect or indirect exposure to such conduct. And this includes family violence, sexual abuse, threats to kill or cause bodily harm to any person, harassment, which includes stalking, failure to provide the necessaries of life, psychological abuse, financial abuse, threats to kill or harm an animal or damage property, and killing of an animal or the damaging of property. In this wider scope of family violence provided under the amended Divorce Act, it means that aside from physical violence, when you are not being provided financially or you are being deprived of your basic needs, especially when your partner is able and has the means to provide them for you, then that is considered family violence under the amended Divorce Act. Also, when your pet is being harmed or was killed, or even when it is just a threat to kill or harm your pet but was never carried out, it is still considered family violence. The reason for adding family violence as one of the factors that the court should consider in determining the best interest of the child is because family violence may have a great impact on the children's well-being. I tell you, if you are or you happen to know someone who is a victim of domestic violence, do not suffer in silence, do not keep it to yourself, do not let it remain a secret, do not turn a blind eye, because if you do, you are only giving the perpetrator a chance to repeat his violent actions on you. Do not think that it will not happen again. There is always a possibility that it will happen again. When you are in doubt and unsure of what to do, consult a lawyer to make sure that you will be properly advised of your rights. You must always remember that the law is on your side. Do it now before it is too late. It will definitely save your life and you might save someone's life. Thank you.
Francia is a registered social worker in Alberta. She has practiced her social work profession in the Philippines, United Kingdom, and Canada. For 10 years, she worked as a social worker in the UK, specializing in child protection and foster care. She is currently employed as a family violence counselor with the Calgary Catholic Immigration Society, or CCIS, focusing on ethno-cultural families who are experiencing family violence. She has been an active community member in various Filipino organizations. She is also a founding member of Bahaghari, or Rainbow, a support group for Filipino LGBTQ2IA in Calgary, and a founding member of Friends Filipinos Rising. Francia, I'll just set the spotlight on you. Please make sure that your video is on.
Thank you, Vice Consul. I will share my slides. Right, okay. Salamat. Thank you for inviting me and for the opportunity to share what is family violence. And this is a very, it's a good opportunity to have this conversation. So as you have heard from Attorney Chantal and Attorney Roslyn, and we keep going back about what is domestic violence or what is family violence. So before I will probably be again, the definition, I want to share with you the statistic of family violence cases in Alberta. So in 2019, half of the homicides in Calgary have occurred in the context of family violence. Our local police have responded to 25,000 calls related family violence. Alberta has the highest rate of family violence in the country, and Filipinos, or the Philippines, has the highest number of families involved with child and family services in Calgary. And I know that in Edmonton, we are the second highest number of families involved in Edmonton child and family services. I want to share with you a video, but I need to stop share and then go, oops. Okay, the video on, okay. So, oops, I need to, how do I do it again, LB?
Sure. You can open your browser from earlier. I think we viewed this earlier. All right. So now that you've opened the browser, you need to go back to Zoom and then click the share screen
and I'll
button.
share it again, right?
Yes, and make sure that you click the one that's showing the video among the selection.
Right. Not sure if you're seeing that now, okay?
Okay, what I'm seeing is the slide from the PowerPoint. So I think you might have chosen or clicked the PowerPoint instead of the video. So you can stop sharing again.
Okay.
So you can click stop sharing. It's
then,
all right. I had trouble earlier today too. I shared the wrong screen, so don't worry. You have company here. And okay, so share screen again. So kindly share screen, and then you will see among the selection there, something should pop up. Let's see. There you go. Perfect. You selected the correct one.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. All right.
What's the standing emergency?
My mommy and Daddy are having a fight.
Is he hitting her?
I'm talking to the police, Mommy. Stop it! Stop it! The baby! Stop it! Could you just send the police, please?
Okay, we're going to be there. What's going on?
They're having a fight because this has been going on forever and ever.
How's he hurting her?
He made some red marks on Mama's
Where did he make the red marks on?
neck. Oh my God!
What's the matter? Is your mother? Hello?
Okay. Right. I think that so that video is a real 911 call of a 5-year-old girl witnessing family violence or fight between mom and dad. I need to share again, right? All right. I stop sharing and then share again. Can you see family violence?
Yes, I see the slide on family violence, although what I'm seeing is the PowerPoint window, which is the same.
Right.
Same thing that happened to me earlier. I displayed my PowerPoint instead of the slide. So that's okay. We can view it. But if you want, you can,
No,
all right, you
I
can
don't
click
want
that one. Yeah, you can click that one. I think you're pointing it at the
Okay.
display slideshow. Yeah.
Issue. Okay. Oops. Current slideshow.
For the current slide.
Stop again, and then I'll share again. Ooh.
Sure.
All right. And then,
There you, okay, so it's the same thing, which is fine.
Yeah.
We can see it. Yeah, but if you want the full screen, you should select the other one, I think.
right, I know. Okay.
I know this is so easy to confuse, isn't it? It's so it is a totally different platform. There you go.
All right.
All right. Okay. What is family violence? That's what we're seeing.
So, our two lawyers have made the discuss about what is family violence and define what is family violence. But I think I would want to talk about family violence is an intentional use of physical force. There's two things that we want to see when there's a family violence. It's the control and the intention to harm a family member. So my controlling behavior, my manipulation and intimidation, and there's harm, nananakit. Ito yung pananakit. There are several types of or forms of abuses. Attorney Chantal, discuss about the forms of abuses with the criminal offenses. But I'll talk about the different types of family violence abuses. The first one is the emotional and psychological abuse. And this is the kind of abuse na sinasaktan yung puso natin. Ito yung belittling, putting down, constant criticism, threatening, at ang naaapektuhan ay yung ating self-esteem or confidence. Kapag ito ay nangyayari at paulit-ulit, ang ibig sabihin, we are experiencing emotional and psychological abuse. The other kind of abuse is verbal abuse. So this is the kind of abuse where our children get scared. Ito yung sigawan, yelling, swearing, name-calling. And if this is happening so many times, not just one time, that means there is a verbal abuse going on. The other kind of abuse is the social abuse or isolation. So this is a kind of abuse in a family violence where there's a control of talking or accessing other people. So stalking or ayaw siyang mag-access or piliin ang mga taong kinakausap. I want you to talk to this person and not to this person. Yung access to other people, yun ang piniprevent ng social abuse or ng isolation. Financial abuse or economic abuse is another kind of abuse where it's not about the absence of money, but it is the control of money. I think it was discussed earlier that yung financial abuse or economic abuse is when there's a control of the money, like for example, nangungutang on the name or on the name of the other partner. Hindi siya nagbabayad, but ginamit niya yung pera niya, hindi naman para sa pamilya. That is financial abuse. Legal abuse is a kind of abuse where the person or the partner is using the legal system like court, yung mga applications and making allegation against the other partner. For example, reporting to immigration or complaining to children's services about neglect or concern sa mga bata, which is mostly unfounded. Those are legal abuse. Sexual abuse, it was explained very, very clear that it is the forcing of the person to have a physical intimacy without the consent. That's sexual abuse. The last one is the physical abuse, and this is hurting the physical body, kicking, hurt, sampal, sipa, batok, sapok, pambabato. Those are physical abuse. Pag-threaten ng knife or kahit anong object na nakakasakit sa katawan, we call that physical abuse. There's so many reasons why families are having family violence. And we know that relationship is not easy, and there's so many stressors in our relationship. So I've identified 4 underlying reasons of family violence. The most common, the drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and mental health issues. But reunification or separation issues is actually a distinct reasons for family violence in the Filipino community. And again, ito yung time na naghihiwalay ang mag-asawa because one partner ay nandito sa Canada, iniwanan ng family, and it takes a little bit of time, several years, bago sila nagre-reconcile. During that reunification, hindi na sila magkakilala, nag-a-adjust sila sa kanilang relasyon, minsan nagkakaroon ng family violence. From my experience as well, I've seen so many issues of the reunification when the other partner na nagkaroon na ng karelasyon dito, pero kinuha pa rin yung family kasi yun naman ang dream talaga na magsama-sama dito sa Canada. But then they're not being honest with the other partner. And when they came here, na found out ng partner na may karelasyon na, may anak na, may iba ng pamilya, that becomes the cause of the problem. So, ano ang epekto nito sa ating mga anak? And it's very, very clear. And as a social worker, this is where the government is concerned when it comes to family violence, because we already know from researches and studies that children who grow up in a violent environment, they have a higher risk of developing mental health issues, and their brain development are also being affected. So there's so many issues attached to the children when they are exposed to family violence. And I know that a lot of the families, Filipino families that I work with, pangarap naman talaga nila magkaroon ng magandang buhay ang mga anak nila. But if our kids are exposed to this, I think those pangarap ay hindi mangyayari, because later on, we can see lots of problems with our children, especially when they start becoming a teenager. What do we do when we are experiencing family violence? I think Attorney Chantal was very, very clear when saying that if you're experiencing family violence, there's so many things that you can do. Do not keep in silence. Talk to someone that you trust. There's so many resources in the community that you can go to. There's confidential hotline that you can talk to. There's some shelters that can actually support you if you want to separate from your relationship. You can call agencies, you can stay with your family or friends, but do not stay in an abusive relationship. And when you are not feeling safe, when you feel that your life is at risk, you have to call 911. I know that there's a lot of consequences calling 911, but it's still the safest way and the best way to be out of that relationship or abusive relationship. We all have the duty to report. As kababayan, kaibigan, we want to help someone who is suffering from family violence or domestic violence. But we also have, as a citizen or a PR in Canada, we have the duty to report family violence. And again, when do we report family violence? Kailan ba natin tayo? Kasi gusto natin tulungan ang ating kababayan. But when is the time that we're going to report family violence? When it is about risking, or when the child and the individual is not safe, we have to make that report, either with Child and Family Services or with 911. I think that's the end of my slides. If you have any question, you can type it up, and there's an opportunity to talk about or ask it in the app after this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Francia.
Thank you.
We will now hear from our next speaker. Our next speaker is Susan F. Azarcon, a cultural health broker for Filipino community at the Multicultural Health Brokers Cooperative. Susan has a background in industrial psychology in the Philippines. She worked in the areas of human resources in Manila before immigrating to Canada with her family in 2002. She has been with the Multicultural Health Brokers for 12 years and has been working extensively on children's services and intervention cases. She derives fulfillment from helping Filipino immigrants involved in the formal system with complex and challenging needs by providing holistic support to strengthen positive relationships and better outcomes for families. She works inside two children's services offices in South Edmonton as a liaison broker. Susan, I'll set the spotlight on you. Just give me a moment.
Salamat Vice Consul LV and Consul General Zaldi Patron for the opportunity to use your office as a platform for information. Magandang gabi na po sa inyo lahat. Okay, I'm going to share my slide. Can find the view. Okay, sorry. I'll just do it again.
We can already see the slide on services for victims
There you
of
go.
domestic violence.
Okay, yeah.
So we can see it, but it's
Okay.
not full screen. But it is. We could read it. So I guess you can go to slideshow.
Okay.
There you go, and then from the beginning
From
or
the
from the
beginning.
current slide.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so I will be talking about the resources and services that are available for victims of family violence. So here I have a table of different services, and it will also show the residency status of our kababayans here, like a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, temporary foreign workers, visitors, international students, and undocumented or non-status, or those who have expired visa and work permits. There are black dots that you will see, which means they're eligible for the services, and the red dots means eligibility will depend on case-to-case basis. Okay, so for the provincial government, there is 911 for both Alberta and Saskatchewan. You call 911 when your children or someone you know are in danger from abuse, your safety is at risk, and you need to get emergency help right away. You can either call 911 or you can have someone call 911 for you. If you call 911, police will arrive and they are allowed to enter your home. And after the police talks to you and your partner, they will decide if one of you will be charged with a crime. And when police charge you with a crime, they will take you to the police station. Other ways to report abuse is also by calling your local RCMP or local police. You can call them directly, or you can call your provincial abuse helpline. It's available 24/7 or 24/7, and you can remain anonymous when you call. So everybody can call, or anybody can call this for help, whether visitors or anybody. Next is then victims are referred to organizations that specialize in victim services. So services provided to individuals in crisis situations are can be supported in terms of helping them with applying for protection order and court processes, the justice system, information and education related to family violence, like how to recognize if domestic violence is happening, help create a safety plan, or connect to resources. So these are some of the agencies that are helping. These are just some. There are a lot more helping the victims of domestic violence. But I would like to mention that the Family Service Saskatoon also help. They also have program for men. They provide them with knowledge and skills to stop the abuse and help build a respectful relationship. There's also financial assistance available. Eligibility will vary between Alberta and Saskatchewan, so it is important to call them for assessment. There is a fleeing abuse benefit, so you need to call Alberta Supports or Saskatchewan Ministry of Social Services Income Assistance to determine your eligibility. There's also victims of crime financial benefit if you suffer from long-term or short-term physical and emotional effects, property damage, and financial loss as a result of domestic violence. You may be eligible for that. There's also the Safer Spaces Certificate. That's how we call it in Alberta. And it's called Certificate Confirming Safety Risk in Saskatchewan. This is when you want to break the rental lease with your landlord without paying a penalty. And if you have Alberta Health Card or Saskatchewan Health Card, you are eligible for provincial health benefit support for addiction issues and mental health issues, and also for your children who have disability. So if you will notice, these are all dependent on your status in Canada. There's also temporary housing. So there are emergency shelters for women and children, including seniors. They can stay there for 21 days. Coming from the emergency shelters, there are transition houses. We call it second stage housing or second or third stage housing. There are also men's shelter and shelters and safe houses for seniors. I'd like to mention that on the second stage or third stage housing, there is a minimal rental fee for those. Okay, and then there's legal services available or resources available. If you can hire your own lawyer and then for low-income families, they can access legal aid, but this is dependent on your income. There are also free legal advice or free legal services that you can access in the community, and if you want to consult with your legal issues. And then in Calgary and Edmonton, if there are children who witness domestic violence, the families are referred to MCHB and CCIS. And then we have contracts with Children's Services, and we work collaboratively with their social workers in supporting the families. To assist families in their personal and family issues, there are also therapeutic services like counseling, parenting education, anger management available for clients who are willing to go through these services. But these services will also be or can also be court mandated for the perpetrators. And of all those resources, one very good resource is by calling your 211 Alberta or 211 Saskatchewan. It is a helpline for community and social services. They have highly trained specialists who will help you find the right resource or service for whatever issue you need help with, not just for family violence situations or family violence resources. And the caller can ask for an interpreter if you need it. And finally, the Canadian government, through the Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, also came out with a program to accelerate the processing of temporary residence permit for victims of domestic violence. So the applicant will have to report the abuse and provide proofs that you are a victim of domestic violence. An example of that would be police report, court documents, letters from social workers or doctors. And at the same time, you can also apply for a work permit. I would like to mention about how we support clients at the Multicultural Health Brokers. For you to have an idea. We deliver our programs in the family's first language at no costs. For example, if you are a Filipino client, you are assigned to a Filipino worker. And family violence cases fall under this intervention program. If there is language barrier, we help clients with linguistic interpretation during client meetings with social workers, teachers, lawyers, and others. However, we do not do court interpretation. We also do cultural bridging, mediating between families and formal systems to reduce conflicts and produce change. An example of this is when social workers are not really, getting the root of what is going on because families do not feel safe to say anything. We tell the social workers the reason why, and we help them understand the reason why. We are also providing holistic support. We do not only support for reasons of domestic violence, but also other needs, such as kung pregnant yung nanay, we connect them to our perinatal health program. And then if there is a child who has a disability, we refer them to, we help them connect to FSCD and refer them to community resources and other supports. We also help the perpetrator and not just the victim. We also do counseling, individual, couples, family, and play therapy for children, connecting them to resources, access, navigation to help court, Alberta Health Services and supports. And we were doing home visitation pre-COVID. So right now we're meeting our clients through different platforms or just phone support. We were also doing parents group before COVID, but now we are all doing that through Zoom. And then I'd like to mention what are our experience in terms of why families are not accessing resources, and why do they stay or stay with an abusive relationship. So first, yung religious and cultural constraints, kasi yung Catholic tayo, our belief is that a marriage is a sacrament and it should not be broken. We would like to keep our family unit. We do not want our children to be products of broken home. Parati natin sinasabi, kawawa ang mga bata, but are we also thinking about the effects of domestic violence on children? if it continues to go on. Na-embarrass din to seek help, nahiya for fear of being judged by relatives and friends. So ang problema is kept within the family. Also, financial dependency on the abuser. If victim is not working, fear of deportation, fear of being alone, especially if a new immigrant in Canada and there are no other family here in Canada. And then also yung access to resources that or almost all, especially financial resources are tied to your residency or income. All right, so the next slides are just online links to those resources in both Alberta and Saskatchewan. So feel free to visit these websites to get more information. Okay, so that wraps up my presentation. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Susan. Let me just stop sharing your screen there.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Susan, and to all of our speakers. We will now open the question and answer forum. I'm now going to invite our reactors for their insights and possible questions. I will begin with Peter, and then he'll be followed by Shirley, and we will round it up with Vito. So Peter, please turn on your video. I will set the spotlight on you. And let me just give me a moment here as I figure out Zoom. All right, Peter, you have the floor.
Hello, thank you for the very informative presentation. That was really a good information from the legal point of view, from the criminal law and family law context, and also the information for victims on how to get help. One thing that was quite interesting that was mentioned earlier was that the domestic violence increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. I was thinking that it's possibly because during that time, a lot of family members lost their jobs, lost income, and that puts a lot of stress on them. And you know, it's because of that stress that they get into this violence. The other thing that I found quite interesting or maybe disturbing is that Filipinos I think in Calgary and Edmonton have the highest number reported of family violence. And I wonder if it has something to do with our cultural structure. And I'd be interested to find out the comments from others regarding that. Other item that I could think of would be how the family domestic violence affect the workplace. Most likely, the victims have experienced a loss of productivity, and the workplace itself becomes some kind of unsafe place, because if the abuser stalks the victim, other employees could be affected in terms of safety, and it's something that the employer might want to look into. There might be some items that they may need to think about and make steps on how to deal with it. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Pete. Let me just make sure that everyone can see everyone. The speakers can react to what Pete shared. Do you guys have anything to say about after Pete's message? Uh, I think he asked about statistics here in Calgary.
Yeah, that statistic, Peter, is actually the statistic that when I was a family violence broker. In Calgary, we have the highest number of families who are involved with child and family services. The reason, and you're right, the reason is one of the things that we've seen is probably because we have the language. So moms or victims can easily call the police and they have the capacity with the language, will not be worried about not needing someone to translate. That's one of the things that I've noticed in with our kababayans, right? Most of us can speak the language um, and can call 911. So that's one of the things that will probably be the reason why we have the highest number. But it's also because we have the high Filipinos are in Alberta. I think we are the second highest immigrants and so the number would also represent that. It's not because tayo ay mga violente, but I think it's the number of Filipinos also in Alberta. Marami tayong number dito at yung capacity natin na magsalita ng English. I think those are the two probably reasons bakit mas marami tayong cases na nai-involve sa child and family services. Thank you.
I would like to add something to that. Siguro may partly cultural din kasi tayo namamalo tayo or kasi nakikita namin sa multicultural health brokers the families that are referred to us ang cases are physical abuse, domestic violence, and parenting issues. So ang mga bata, they are trained at school no to report. So pag merong mga palo sa parents, they will tell their teachers or without any intention of reporting them or kasi yung mga bata sometimes they will be asked there are activities that they will be asked to draw something and then they will draw something that will that will result in calling and teachers calling children's services. So yeah. And the effect of that also is because of COVID. Maybe tama kayo yung loss of income, kadamihan na nawalan ng trabaho, and then working less hours, and this poses us challenge or sa mga couples and families.
LV,
Thank you, Susan. Yes, Conjan, please.
Yes. Well, thank you, Mr. Scanlar, for your question, no? And also for the explanation of Francia and Susan. Related to Francia's comment that could be related to the number of Filipinos here in Alberta and Saskatchewan, I just would like to put context on that, no? Because indeed, Alberta has the second biggest Filipino population in Canada, next to Ontario. We have 175,000 Filipinos in Alberta alone, and Calgary hosts the biggest number of Filipinos with about 75,000. So probably that could explain the high number of cases reported also, no, to the authorities. And Saskatchewan is 34,000 Filipinos. So these two provinces have combined the Filipino population of about 210,000 Filipinos. So that's a population that is even greater than many Filipino populations in other countries. So just for our viewers to know how many Filipinos there are in Alberta, Saskatchewan. Thank you.
Thank you, Conjan. And I think by answering or addressing Pete's comments, Francia and Susan also answered the question of Dr. Glenda Bonifacio in our Q&A box here. She asked, what is the rate of cases affecting Filipinos in Alberta, and are Filipinos amenable to reporting domestic violence? So I think Francia addressed this with her comments earlier. Okay,
I
so
just want to add something to that, Vice
yes,
Consul
please.
LB. Sometimes yung mga families, they don't have any idea about reporting to police. So they will call 911 and then sasabihin nila later on pag na-charge yung partner nila, pwede ba nating iurong yung kaso? I just called the police because I just want to give him a lesson. So yun yung mga cases na minsan na although they report, hindi nila alam yung consequences after they report.
Yeah. Kasi habang nag-aaway or during the actual altercation or situation, talagang heightened yung mga emotions, no? Nababawasan yung pagiging rational ng mga tao. So yung emotions nila nagdadala ng mga decision nila. So that would help us understand why people might decide to do those things. Yeah. Lalo na mga Pilipino are very emotional people. We act on our emotions, yeah, which can be both a good thing and a bad thing sometimes. All right. So next, we're going to call on Shirley. Shirley, if you could share with us your questions, comments, or insights, that would be great. Okay, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you for inviting. And actually, the organization of UPAA has been involved either a year or 2 years ago in the domestic violence. So this is not new, but it's so sad that it still continues. And what we offered our services to, and Francia can attest this, that we offered UPAA to be interpreters. And unfortunately, we only had really one case so far yet to attend. And as Miss Susan Azarcon also said, it really, like, the partner wants just to punish the other partner and then they reconcile. So like, much as I was there in the court, my services were not really rendered, they reconciled. That's the good thing. But what I'd like to suggest as a community, as we spoke in the workshop, is that let's be proactive. How can we be proactive? How can associations help? Let's say, welcome, let's say, newcomers here in Calgary, and put forward some kind of safe haven. So if children are being, there is child abuse, is there a way that possibly we can organize, get the children away and then put it in a Filipino home? Those who would like to volunteer, like I would volunteer for, there's a case for children being abused. That way, until it gets settled between the parents, at least the children are in a safe haven. So that's one example. Another possibly is that we called it the, in the natives where there is the Council of Elders. So instead of husband and wives, trying to bang each other, who's right or wrong, and trying to abuse, or like, hey, I'm right, I'm wrong, is that maybe they can do some kind of arbitration. Instead of going right away, I'm going to report you to the police. If there's a council or some group of people that are willing to be trained, of course, by let's say CCIS or the brokers, and these are to be trusted by the people. Like, okay, it's not trying to side who's right or wrong, but at least try to make some sense of it, and using our language instead of speaking in English. That way they are so comfortable telling their side of the story. So I'd like to really volunteer associations to come together and help our community, so that we just don't rely on government services, much as it's appreciated, but maybe we can, as a community, put people together and help them resolve any issue. Because separation, like a mother, and when the consul said a mother and the son, there was an abuse, maybe there's a way that we can help the mother and children get accustomed to being together, like get activities or helping the mother, somehow brainstorming among associations that we can help social workers too. Like there's so I mean I many of my friends are social workers, so I hear these stories, and I venture consul general get together us association and see what what options we can offer, you know, against domestic violence instead of always going legal way or going to this agency. Is there a way as a community we can reach out to these people who needs help? So
Thank you, Shirley. Yes,
that's
I
my
think,
thank
yeah,
you.
I think those are really good ideas. And some of them are actionable as well. I think what Shirley is, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're referring to is like, let me just remove the spotlight so we can see everyone. And let me just put you on gallery view so I can see all of you as well. What you were alluding to is like putting a half step right before it's escalated to the government or
Yes.
authority. So somewhere
Yes.
there in between, maybe a small council. And I also like that you mentioned the role of the community in providing a safe environment. Like bago dalhin yan sa police or sa estasyon or bago tumawag sa 911, like yung sinabi ni Susan earlier, meron bang isa pa silang pwedeng takbuhan, no? Or
Yes.
tawagan.
And
So I think,
maybe
yeah.
just giving that information to the people so that, oh, I can call this number, and then whatever this number can decide who we can reach
Or
out to
can
other
assist them,
people.
no? All
Yeah.
right, great. Okay, so now let us invite maybe Francia and Susan. Maybe you have experience in this. You can share your insights, and of course, our attorneys Chantal and Rosalind can also pitch in here. I think they can offer valuable advice, or not advice, but information that we could find useful. Thank you.
Based on working with a lot of Filipino and immigrants, specifically Filipino families, they don't usually call the police the first time they had an argument, right? So from our research, it says that 15 to 45 times before, 15 to 45 times of arguments,
15 to 45.
before they will call the police. Most of the time, they will go to their natural support. So families, relatives, churches, though the pastors, the church leaders, most of the time sila yung pinupuntahan. So these are not something na parang new. I think what Shirley is suggesting is a more organized one. Day-to-day life of our Filipino kababayans, they actually go to those people, right? Those people that they trust. Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and why not try? And whatever support that our community will provide, I think that will help a lot of our kababayans, because we know there's so many problems, there's so many, they need a lot of help, especially when children's services is involved. Because anytime that there's a family violence, there's a child and family service. And so they always ask for natural support or community support. And if we can create what Shirley is saying, we can be the community support for this family. So I think it's a good idea, and I would want to try that idea.
And we appreciate her volunteering as well. This shows how serious she is about what she's saying. Yeah. All right. So thank you, Shirley, and thank you, Francia. Next, we will invite Lito. Lito, are you ready to speak? If you can unmute your microphone, and I'll put the spotlight on you. All right. There you go, Lito. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me here. At magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Napakaganda po ng mga tinalakay. Talaga namang kapakipakinabang. Ngayon, bakit laging lalaki ang napapagbintangang nananakit? Nakarinig na ba tayo ng binugbog na lalaki o abused na lalaki? So why do we frequently blame or accuse men or husbands of abusing women? So Paano po kung tumawag kami ng 911? Papaniwalaan kaya kami? So, dahil sa ang nature ng lalaki ay strong, di ba? Parang walang sense ang aking kaisipan, ang aking katanungan, pero may mga nalaman ako rito na personal kong experiences, ang mga lalaki ay nasasaktan, hindi pumapatol. Paano naman yung kung hindi sa akin, hindi ka magmumukhang tao? Paano naman yung mga lalaki na kung hindi dahil sa akin, hindi ka makakarating sa Canada? Paano naman yung ang kapal ng mukha mo, ng apog mo, ginagamit mo ang kotse ko? Paano naman yung ang kapal ng pagmumukha mo? Nagdadala ka ng mga kaibigan dito. Dapat ikaw ay naririto sa bahay pagkatapos ng trabaho mo. Wala kang karapatang makipagkaibigan. Paano naman kami mga lalaki, no? So, are we protected by the law? Are our rights can be our protectors? Sample. May kaibigan ako sa University of Alberta Hospital. Nalulungkot nung umaga. Paring June, anong problem? Diba maya-maya ay nawala? Alam nyo kinabukasan, pinugot niya ang ulo ng kanyang may bahay. Dito sa Milbourne Mall, katabi ng Milbourne. Kinarit niya, patay. Anong sabi ng babae? May karapatan ako dito sa Canada. Kinuha lang kita.
All right, thank you,
Okay.
Vito. Yeah, I think that's that's definitely a valid question. And he even provided some sample arguments that could be had, no? Yung mga ibang mga pagtatalo at mga masasakit na sinasabi minsan kapag nag-aaway na, no? Yeah, should we submit your question now so it can be addressed by our resource persons? Maybe we can start with our attorneys, no? Like Chantal, because you asked about your rights. And you have the right to ask about your right. Tama yan, no?
Protektado po ba siya? Mapoprotektahan ba? Paano ka pa mapoprotektahan kung patay ka na?
Yeah. All right. So maybe one of our attorneys can address that very important question. Very serious one as well.
Anong edukasyon ang pwede nating dalhin sa mga?
Meron ng mga nasasaktan, no? Thank you, Lito.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gusto ko lang pong i-emphasize na yung Protection Against Family Violence Act, yung Protection Against Family Violence Act is a provincial legislation. So nag-a-apply siya sa Alberta. Although I know naman na sa other provinces, meron din silang legislation about domestic violence. So yung ating legislation, yung Protection Against Family Violence Act is hindi naman siya naka-specify na babae lang ang pwedeng magreklamo. So any person. So pwede siyang mag-file ng application for emergency protection order. So yung binabanggit niyo po kasi ay most of the time yung mga babae ang na-abuse. Pero siguro nga rin most of the time mga babae yung nagrereklamo. So marami po kasi tayong factors na i-consider diyan. Diba yung kapag kasi yung babae sinasaktan niya yung lalaki, titignan din kasi ng court malaki ba yung lalaki, 'di ba? May chance ba na talagang mas grabe, hindi ba siya lumaban, yung mga ganon. So maraming aspeto ding nakikita. Pero ang sa akin, hindi siya limited lang sa, hindi lang babae ang pinoprotektahan ng batas natin.
Yes. Thank you,
Ang tanong, attorney, papaniwalaan ba kami?
Yeah. That's for up to the court.
Kasi, up to the courts na yan. Kasi, papakinggan niya yung evidence ng both parties. Meron namang, syempre, yung claimant, magpa-present siya ng evidence. The respondent will also present his or her evidence. Diba? So, it's up to the court to decide kung sino ba yung mas mabigat yung kanyang evidence.
Darating ba ang pulis? Tumawag nga kami ng pulis dito. Kinabukasan pa dumating. Paano yun? Emergency ba yun?
Okay, so he's citing an example based on experience. No, maybe one of our, okay, Francia, please.
Totoo. Ilang kaso po ang harap ko rito bilang media man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tumatawag sa akin, itinatawag ko ng pulis, ang pulis ay hindi dumarating, patay.
Yeah. And salamat Lito kasi I should have said that doon sa slides ko, nawala lang yung slides ko nung but equally parehas ang babae at ang lalaki may capability maging violente, right? We are both equally capable of being violent. At sa karanasan ko sa family violence, I've seen so many men na abuse. And so many women na charged din. So this is not just, and I agree with Attorney Chantal, hindi lang ito para sa mga babae. However, mataas ang percentage na ang babae ang nagre-report kasi mataas talaga din ang percentage. And let's be parang realistic dito na mataas talaga ang numbers o ang percentage ng mga babae at mga kababaihan at kabataang babae na naaabuso. So kaya sila ang mas maraming. So sa mga presentation, ako very careful ako when I present yung slides ko because most of the presentations that we have, babae ang naaabuso, lalaki ang nang-a-abuse, which is not true. Hindi yung totoo sa lahat ng situation. And you are right. Marami. And if you call my police, the police will treat yung men kaparehas dapat ng paano nila tinitreat yung mga babae pagdating sa response sa family violence. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of shelters for men. And when me and Susan was talking about resources, they're very, very few. And I can only probably think of dalawa in Calgary or na pwedeng magstay ang lalaki kapag kailangan nila ng safe place para sa kanila. And it's because konti din kasi nga ang numbers of men who are reporting na nagkakaroon ng experience ng family violence.
Thank you, Francia. Meron po ba tayong reaction?
I just want to add something to that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, ako din sa in many years of working with child intervention, may mga siguro meron din mga lalaki na na-abuse, na napikinggan ng pulis, na napakulong nila yung mga asawa nila. And yun nga, sabi ni Francia, in Edmonton, we don't have men's shelter who are victims of domestic violence. Kadalasan pumupunta sila sa mga homeless shelters. So that's the unfortunate thing about very limited lang. Kasi konti din lang naman.
I mean, compared to female victims.
Compared to women and children.
Dahil nagpapasensya.
Yes. Possible din yan kasi cultural, ano? It's part of our culture and yung mga cultural expectations sa mga lalaki ng kultura natin, kultura dito sa Canada, maybe we can also factor that in trying to understand kung bakit ganyan ang situation. I think it's great that you raised that, Lito, because there's also an opportunity for us to clarify that just because we say that the majority or the overwhelming majority of victims are women, that doesn't mean na i-invalidate or hindi totoo na biktima rin ang mga lalaki or ang mga males, no? For sure, they should also be supported by society to ask for help when they are on the receiving end of family violence. And minsan lang isa sa mga nilalabanan nila ay ang kultura natin mismo na kapag lalaki ka, kailangan kaya mo yan, or yung mga other negative perceptions kapag hindi mo kaya yung asawa mo, yung wife mo, no? But thank you so much for raising it. It's a valid question for sure. And I feel bad about what you said earlier about you calling the cops and the cops coming the following day. So hopefully when there is a need for help can come on time. Yeah. All right.
Inayos lang po akong
yes, another
dito
one.
Dito sa Edmonton po, mayroon kami ritong Changing Together saka yung Saranay. They are attending to the welfare of women. Ito na naman, mga kababaihan na naman lang. Yung Changing Together. Si Tita Josie Pollard, Dr. Josie Pollard.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing.
Para lang. Kasi kaya ako nabanggit, nagtuturo ako ng Filipino language doon sa school.
With Saranay, yes. As we've had her before in our other, thank you for sharing that. And
salamat.
In relation to what you said, we have comments from participants or attendees here. relating to what you said, no? When information is shared, or someone speaks about something that is not normally spoken about, we receive reactions to either clarify or confront, but the good thing is it's being discussed. So on the issue of males being on the receiving end of violence, we have some reactions here. And for us to think about, meron sinabi si Dr. Glenda Bonifacio, who herself studies gender, so this is coming from an authoritative source. She says that family violence is gender-based violence, and of course there are two genders, naman and so that applies to men as well, I suppose. And over 90% of gender-based violence is committed against women and girls, but that also is not invalidate that remaining 10%. And also a comment from Pete. Men could be victims and have rights. I think he shares these ideas with you and with all of us, pretty much. No one is disagreeing with what Lita is saying. And the problem might be that they are reluctant to report for fear and embarrassment of being seen as weak. So totoo ito. This is definitely a part of our reality. No? Na kapag humingi ka ng tulong, mahina ka, lalo na sa mga lalaki. No? This is quite an unfair expectation sa mga lalaki. Yeah. All right. Okay, so we have some questions. Lito rounds up our reactors. We had really good reactions from everyone, and really, like, talagang challenge niya ang perception natin at conversations natin. It livened it up.
Sorry for displaying my
No, it's okay. No, it's fine. No one is ignorant here. It's a good thing that you raised it because it was an opportunity for people to speak about it. Yeah, and to clarify some misconceptions maybe surrounding it. Okay, so we have some questions. It's now 7 p.m. Would you be okay to extending the webinar for maybe 15 minutes? Because we have some questions. All right.
Okay.
So start natin. We have two questions on the Q&A. One is a question to Susan. This is from Maricar Dilan. Thank you, Maricar, for your question. She asked Susan, are you seeing a growing number of Filipino families availing of various services offered by the MCHB or the multicultural health brokers?
Marami ho, marami. For children's services cases, dumidiretso ho yan sa MCHB. At meron din ho mga non-intervention cases na programs namin that families are connecting to MCHB, yung aming perinatal health, at yung mga iba pang programs namin. So, meron ho. Pero yung domestic violence ho, madami tayo. In fact, sa Edmonton, pangalawa ho tayo sa may maraming referrals from children's services, yung mga Filipino families.
All right. Thank you, Susan. We have another question here. This is from Magno Daria. Magno, thank you for your question. Actually, this is a comment. I'll just read it out. Sabi niya, newcomers should be educated towards integrating to the culture, laws, and policies that they should adapt in the Canadian way of life. An information session that will showcase the norms or the highs and lows in Canada, like with child abuse. As parents, we came to Canada bringing with us our own culture and the way we were brought up, which is not acceptable to the Canadian culture. Awareness and information is a major factor that we can straighten these differences. Okay, so yes, I don't think anyone would disagree with this. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and for typing that in.
Last question, ma'am.
Lito, is it okay if we ask a question from the attendees and then we go back to you?
Okay.
Thank you for your understanding. Okay, so kasi merong mga earlier questions dito, no? Let me just go through them. Ito, technical to. Would the speakers be willing to share your presentations according to Marjorie Newman? Would you be okay? I can email this to Marjorie. Marjorie, I have your email address. Yeah. All right, so walang objections from the presenters, so I'll share their presentations to you, Marjorie. Okay, so Ormelin asked a question earlier, which I think Rosalind already answered, but I'll share it here. She asked, does that family violence law also apply in Quebec? So is this a federal law? Maybe the lawyers can answer this. And Ormelin followed that with, I know they follow civil law, and I'm not sure if it's the same with family law. Yeah, okay, so family violence ba raw, federal or provincial lang yan?
Yeah, so Protection Against Family Violence Act is a provincial legislation in Alberta, but the Divorce Act is a federal legislation.
Thank you. May shinare din si Rosalind kanina, sinagot niya directly si Ormelin, but it was not viewed by the other participants. No? So Rosalind answered, if the family violence amounts to a criminal offense, it can be prosecuted anywhere in Canada as the criminal code applies to all provinces and the territories in Canada. Yeah, if it amounts to a criminal offense, that needs to be emphasized. No? Okay, so may question then si Ormelin, another one. How could a victim request an order to request for drug testing or mental check to be issued to the perpetrator, I suppose. Police said if they can't request unless they caught him in possession. Okay, so from now on, I'm gonna ask some questions anonymously. Now, maybe it would be better if the questions are anonymous. Yeah, so I'll repeat this. Somebody asked, could a victim request an order to have someone tested for drugs or receive a mental check to be checked regarding their mental state, and that based on experience, I'm assuming here, police said that if they can't request unless they the perpetrator or the one committing the violence is caught in the act or caught him in possession. Tama ba itong I'll read it verbatim na lang. Police said if they can't request unless they caught him in possession. I'm not sure what possession means. Is this a technical legal term? All right. Maybe we need to clarify. Maybe the person who sent that question can send a clearer. It can be sent in Filipino as well. You can email it to us, and then we can forward it to our speakers, and then maybe we can email you back their ideas about it. Okay, and all right, and we have one last question from Facebook, and then we'll return kay Lito. All right, on Facebook, ay marami na palang comments sa Facebook. Ngayon ko lang siya nakita. Okay, Mavic from Facebook said, could you please forward this to the speakers? How do you explain patriarchy and gender inequality? Okay, as let me just scroll down. As the root cause of domestic violence and all forms of violence against women and children. Ulitin ko siya, no? How do you explain the patriarchy and gender inequality as the root cause of domestic violence and all forms of violence against women and children? So patriarchy and gender inequality. Yeah, do we have some ideas here? The patriarchy, please correct me if I'm wrong here. The patriarchy is when society or institutions are more focused on males having the traditional positions of power and how that affects the prospects and empowerment of women, and how that then leads to social or gender inequality. Yeah.
So if I may just...
Yes, please. Yes, Chantal, please.
So this is a little bit similar to the question of Lito a while ago.
Yeah.
So I will say that the legislation protects not only the women, but also men. So it applies to everyone.
Yeah. Right. And yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. So Mavic, I hope that we will be able to answer your question, if not here, in the next webinars that we will have, which perhaps you can invite some speakers who have a background on gender studies. Okay. All right. We have additional questions here. Okay, so I'll just mark some questions here. Okay, so let me just quickly scroll sa Facebook kung meron pa. Okay. All right, so Mavic helped identify the term patriarchy. Let's have a learning moment here. According to Mavic, the patriarchy is a system of society or government which men hold power and women are largely excluded from it. Okay, so I think this is somewhat similar to what I described earlier, no? And this is also up to us kung paano natin iintindihin ang mga konseptong ito. No? At kung paano natin i-apply sa topic na dinidiscuss natin ngayon. Okay, so another one here, we have some, okay, so, all right. Okay, merong comment dito sa Facebook. This is public, so I guess I can attribute this to her, kay Reina Lee Jorolan, or Jorolan. There's also another thing that we need to be aware of and needs more education about. Domestic assault with bodily harm can also be experienced by our children in school. Does that count as family violence if it happens in school to kids?
Under the Protection Against Family Violence Act, if you are married or if it's committed by a parent against a child, so if you are related by blood, by marriage or adoption, then that will still be considered as family violence.
Regardless of where it occurs.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, that's really good information. That's useful. We have another one here. Nanihingi si Mavic. Si Mavic Olito. Are statistics on cases of domestic violence among Filipino-Canadian families available? Available ba to? Specific to Filipino-Canadian families? Stats, either federally or provincial level? Wala sa right now, we don't have.
Wala tayo specific sa, but merong statistic sa website. Pwede tayo makakuha sa IRCC ng mga stats, but not specific to Filipino-Canadian community. So I don't know, naghanap ako. I actually look around and wala. But kami, for example, because we are service providers, we have our own statistic based on families that we are na-serve namin. So, and pero maliit lang yun. That's only for yung coverage na namin dito sa, for example, dito sa Calgary. So I don't know kung meron kayong makukuha ng statistic, we also want to know. Kasi kung wala tayong information doon.
And statistics are very important talaga, no? Because that will help paint the most accurate and objective picture. Because anyone can make a claim na hindi, ganito ang abuse. Mas maraming nasasaktan sa ganito or sa lugar na to or sa mga gender na to. But without statistics to support the claims, it will stand on weak ground. You know? All right. So thank you for that, Mavic.
So sa Edmonton din, yung data namin is just from MCHB. We do not know about data from yung neighboring towns or cities namin dito sa Edmonton.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
LV, I can also answer the question of Ms. SW with respect to the request for an order to request for a drug testing. So if you file an application if you file an application for an emergency protection order, you cannot ask for a drug testing. But if you file an application for parenting, then you can probably ask that an order be issued to have the respondent or the respondent have a drug testing or mental check.
There you go. I hope that our registrant who's with us here on Zoom heard that, no? Okay, so I'll just nag-post dito si Dr. Glenda, who is a gender studies professor. She defined the patriarchy, so I think I can trust that she has authority to give a definition. She says patriarchy is an organizing system of power, or maybe an organized system of power vested in male values, practices, and privileges that runs through social, economic, political, religious, etc. systems. Okay. Thank you, Potoan. All right, so we will go back to Lito for his question, and then the last question here from a participant on Zoom, and then we will wrap it up now. So 2 more questions from Lito and someone who asked on Zoom. Lito, you have the floor.
Maraming salamat pong muli at pasensya na. Dito po sa diaryong ito, kung mababasa niyo yung sinulat ko sa Filipino, sinulat ko rito at talaga namang binagbigay-pugay ako sa mga kababaihan. Ang sinabi ko ron, babae ka, hindi babae lang. Okay? So ibig sabihin, pinopromote ko, ako ay nag-advocate. I'm also advocating the rights and equality of women in the society. So nakakatuwa nga kasi most of our writers in this paper, they've tackled about the rights of women. So Marjorie Newman is there, Marco Luciano is there, Ida Lucila is there, Giselle General. They all wrote about women. Ako po, mahal na mahal ko ang wikang Pilipino. Kaya hindi po ako masyadong komportable sa pag-English. Ako pag-English nyo, never.
Ayos lang
So,
po. Yes, Lito. Ano
okay
po ang
po.
may tatanong nila?
So,
Yes.
ito po. Ang uugatin po natin ang pinaghuhugutan ng problema natin ngayon sa aking kaisipan. Ang tanong ko, saan ba humugot ng tapang ang mga babae? Bakit? Ganun na lamang minsan sila makapagsalita dahil ba sila pinagpapasensyahan? At bakit tinitiis nila ang mga pananakit na ginagawa sa kanila? Dahil ba sa kultura na kinakailangan ang mga para sa mga anak, para sa mga bata, para sa mga sasabihin ng tao, para sa pamilya? Okay? At bakit naman nagiging libangan ng mga kalalakihan ang pananakit? So, sa mga abogado po na naririto ngayon, ako'y may katanungan. Ano po ba talaga ang kaparusahan sa mga nanakit? Baka naman ubod ng babaw, baka hindi nasaktan yung pinarusahan. Baka kinurot-kurot lang. So, malilibang talaga yan. Kung halimbawa, 3 araw mo lang ipinakulong, papabalikin mo na. So, para po sa kaalaman ng lahat, kung maaari po sana na ano ba yung proportionate na punishments doon sa pagpapataw ng parusa. So, ako po, may suggestion ako doon sa mga padating galing Pilipinas, pero naka-reserve na po yung question ko. Kung may pre-departure orientation seminar doon, tinuturo doon kung paano magluluto sa stove, gagamit ng mga bagay, sana naman sa ugali din. Pagdating dito, sana magkaroon ng courtesy call sa inyo po, sa Philippine Consular Office, yung ang tawag natin, upon arrival orientation program or seminar din. Kaysa mamili ka na agad, pumasel ka doon sa outlet, kung saan-saan, ano ba naman na makipag-zoom ka kay Consul General, andito na po ako, tapos sana po may programa rin kayo. Ito ang buhay dito. Oo. Tinalakay namin ang tungkol sa pananakit. Kayo mga babae, huwag kayong bungangera, mamamatay kayo rito. Sige, you cannot be protected by the law. Oo. Kasi kung patay ka na, ano pang karapatan mo? So, yun lang po ang aking mungkahi. At kami naman po ay handa rin tumulong, makipagtulungan sa pagpapalaganap ng ating mga panukala sa ating mga kababayan.
Okay, thank you so much, Lito.
Okay
yes.
po.
All right. So unahin natin yung tanong ni Lito for something that's based, yung merong legal basis, kung sinasabi nga, no? Ano ba raw ang penalty ng mga abusers kapag napatunayan na sila nga ay totoong nanakit ng kanilang family members, hindi lang ng asawa, kundi lahat ng family members. And I think si Chantal yung nagsabi, even yung mga pets, they count as kapag victim, no? So basta family. So maybe the lawyers, Rosalind and Chantal, maybe they can answer this regarding the penalties.
Sagutin kita dito.
Yes.
Dito, ang assault dito sa Canada kasi, ano siya meron siyang yung simple assault, meron din siya yung assault with a weapon, meron siyang aggravated assault. So depende kung anong klase yung charges at depende sa circumstances ng kaso. So, syempre pag yung iba na konting away lang at talaga namang walang nasaktan, nasampal lang, walang criminal record, no previous criminal record yung kinasuhan, kadalasan na uuwi yung sa tinatawag na peace bond. A peace bond is a process yon na meron, it's where before a justice of court na ang peace officer ang nahaharap sa korte at sasabihin niya na yung complainant merong konting reasonable fear sa kanyang safety. Kaya yung taong kinakasuhan, pag pumayag siya doon kasi ino-offer ng Crown yun, magko-consent siya para mag-agree and mag-attend siya ng mga counseling. So tinatawag, yun yung pinakamababa na, yung tawag doon yung peace bond. Pero doon sa mga sitwasyon naman na malala, like nasaktan, no, hospital, syempre ipapresenta yan sa court yung mga injuries na na-sustain through medical certificates. So meron talagang kulong din. So really depende doon sa kaso, depende sa circumstances ng case. So hindi yung tipong biro-biro lang. Ako criminal defense lawyer ako, so nagde-defend ako ng mga taong kinakasuhan. Yung mga kinakasuhan ng assault. Meron tinatawag dito sa Calgary, for example, domestic violence court. So we deal mostly with assault ng mga family against a family member. Pero for your consideration dito, hindi lang naman, may mga kliyente ako na mga babae na kinakasuhan din ng kanilang mga partners. So hindi naman lang puro babae lang yung agrabyado. So meron din mga lalaki. So hindi defend ko din yung mga yon.
Alright, that's good to know. Thank you, Roslyn. Chantal,
Pupunta ako sa inyo.
Sure.
Meron ka bang mai-share sa amin, Chantal, regarding the penalty?
Oo, kasi yung penalty more on sa criminal aspect talaga. Kasi sa family law, ang sinasabi lang ng batas ay poprotektahan lang yung victim. Kaya ang sinasabi ito, i-restrain lang siya, hindi siya pwedeng lumapit, hindi niya pwedeng kontakin. So yun yung terms ng order. There is a penalty sa criminal aspect talaga yun.
Okay, thank you. So meron pang dalawang tinanong may pagka-rhetorical to. Okay, sige, Francia has a question.
LB, gusto ko lang sagutin yung tanong ni Lito. Kasi kapag may anak at nagkaroon ng family violence, automatic yon na may report sa Child and Family Services. Hindi man kinasuhan o hindi man, kung na-charge, usually pinapaalis siya ng bahay for a certain period of time habang nag-hearing hanggang nakapag-decide ang judge. But kung hindi man nakasuhan at na-involve ang Child and Family Services, maraming ginagawa o pinapagawa ang social worker sa mag-asawa. Hindi lang doon sa nanakit, pero doon din sa nasaktan. So isa sa trabaho ko yon, bigyan sila ng education, ipaintindi sa kanila kasi hindi naman, and na magdi-disagree siguro ako na parang hobby yung pananakit. Hindi naman hobby yung pananakit. May dahilan naman.
Sorry for the term.
Hindi po hobby yun. Nagkakaroon talaga, may problema.
I stand corrected.
And hindi madali na hindi ma-fix to ng mabilis. And so, kapag na-involve ang Child and Family Services, nagpo-provide sila ng napakadaming serbisyo para matulungan ang pamilya, ang mag-asawa, na ma-address sana yung mga underlying issues na meron sila, right? And at the end, para maging better parents sila sa kanilang mga anak. So kung hindi aabot dun sa korte, meron pa rin maraming consequences doon sa pag-aaway nila. And just to that, minsan mas mahirap pa nga yung Child and Family Services ma-involve. Mas matagal sila kumpara sa court. So lahat yun ay tinitingnan at sinusuportahan ng government. Salamat.
Okay, thank you, Francia.
Salamat po.
All right, Susan, do you have a comment?
Sinabi na lahat ni Francia.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I think it's a good thing na comprehensive talaga. Tsaka experience-based yung mga answers niyo yung lahat kasi you actually do this for a living. No?
At saka pag hindi sila sumunod sa Child and Family Services, for example, yung parents or yung perpetrator, mas mahigpit sila. They will not go away. Hanggat hindi mo binabago yung sarili mo and hanggat hindi mo ginagawa yung gusto nilang ipagawa sa'yo.
Okay. All right. So may mga rhetorical question din yung nature niya, rhetorical. Is bakit nga ba tinitiis ng mga babae ang abuse kapag sila or siguro dahil na-mention mo na rin na pati mga lalaki ay ina-abuse sa ibang mga sitwasyon, bakit tinitiis ng mga victims yung family violence or domestic abuse? And bakit nagpo-persist or nagko-continue ang abuse from the abuser? So those are questions that you need to ask. No? Siguro may mga studies that would help explain why, katulad ng power dynamics in the home, financial dependence on the breadwinner, who might or might not be the abuser. So there are many factors that could be considered when trying to think up of an answer to those very important and very sad questions. Yeah. All right. Okay, so medyo nagtagal tayo, no? Kasi ang ganda ng mga usapan natin dito. Gusto ko pa siyang patagalin, kaso baka nagugutom na kayo. It's already 7:30. So maybe time na para i-wrap up natin ang ating webinar. Okay, so let me just take a look here. Gusto uli namin pasalamatan sina Susan, Francia, Rosalind, and Chantal, no? And our speakers, reactors, Lito, Shirley, and Peter. I will now ask Consul General Zaldi for to deliver his closing remarks and to formally end today's webinar. Consul General, the floor is yours.
Maraming salamat, LB. Again, maraming salamat, no, to our 4 lady resource persons, no? Attorney Bernardo, Attorney Borja, Ms. Bodoso, and Ms. Azarcon, for agreeing to partner with the PCG for this online forum and help us educate our Filipino community in Alberta and Saskatchewan about domestic violence. I also wish to thank our reactors, Ms. Chavez, Mr. Scanlar, Mr. June Velasco. It is the PCG's hope that Filipino families in Canada will always remain intact and whole. We know the great deal of sacrifices that some of our community members have to go through to start a living in Canada and to bring their families here. The last thing we want to see is for them to be apart because they either consciously or unconsciously commit acts of domestic violence or have become helpless victims. Through this online forum, I hope our community will become more aware and more empowered in dealing with threats of domestic violence. Salamat po, and we hope to see you in our next online forum. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you.
And that concludes the PCG's webinar on understanding domestic violence in the Canadian context. Thank you and good evening. Salamat po sa inyong lahat. Salamat sa pagpapanood. Salamat sa pag-attend. Sa susunod
Lito Velasco po, Conjen, hindi June Velasco.
Noted, Lito. Sorry about that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, guys. Thank you to our viewers on Facebook. Please keep on joining our webinars in the future.